Hello my friends and welcome to an episode of FISHTORY. I just wanted to do a little update here on my Elassoma Gilberti. They spawned about 4 weeks ago and I was worried about breeding any sort of fish that would require my care when I've been so sick lately. However, I put this tank on the counter in the kitchen and I have not been afraid of these guys spawning. I moved the parents and put them back into another tank in another room. And all in tanks under 2.5 gallons. You can do this if you'd like. This is a 4-gallon from Aquarium Co-op, but I usually use 2.5 gallons for this. And you can see that these fry have hatched and they're growing out in here. And all I did was I introduced Daphnia and Cyclops live cultures from outside in my pond, and that also brought in algae and all sorts of other little things. And yes, there is a risk that there could be parasites or something in there, but I'm not too worried about it as these are fairly cold water ponds that I have here in Seattle. It's kind of the start of the summer. They're not like really old stagnant things. It's rainwater and leaves and whatever has grown in there over the last few years of me keeping fish. So it seems pretty good to go most of the time. I've never gotten any problems from it for my fish when I target the free swimming critters. So I'm not taking the muck and the debris, the stuff that's breaking down into ammonia and nitrite, stuff like that from the bottom or anything. It's not like the waste from the ponds. This is the exact opposite. So there is a lot of algae and green water in here, which helps these babies grow. These little fry love that stuff, and that is what they're going to eat. Now, most of these fry are not like this gigantic fella here. This one has grown so fast. I mean, it's still very small, as those are Daphnia, and let me show you my thumb next to that guy. Yeah. So they're still very small, but much bigger than some of the others. There was another fry swimming right over here. This is the size that most of these guys are, and you can see it's kind of hard to focus with all the algae in the tank, but there are lots of other critters in here, including I put 2 ram's horn snails in here, and this is what ends up happening. You end up with a lot of ram's horn snails on everything eventually. Also, you can see there's a lot of bubbles in here. It's just from light. There's no filter in here, nothing like that. These are just simple plants that I used from my other tank. So they may have had algae, they may have had little tiny, isopods or copepods or whatever on them. There are no scuds in here, as those would probably eat the fry. However, there are isopods. Aquatic isopods are in here, and they actually did a beautiful job of not touching any of these eggs. And I removed the parents once I saw eggs. And then I thought, okay, we'll see if this is true that they clean the eggs, because isopods supposedly clean the eggs of fish in studies when they looked at danios and other fish out there. When they used a glass bottom tank with nothing in it, they refrained from eating any viable eggs in research, and it actually helped the hatch rate. So here you can see really well this little fry. And it's only 4 weeks old. I've never had these guys grow this fast, but I've been leaving this light on in this tank for about 16 to 18 hours a day. And I think that's helping the algae and the green water, which is what the Daphnia here are eating. And if you had a microscope, we would see all the little green dots in the water that are algae. But you can also see there's filamentous algae, and you can see that the babies' bellies are full. That's not yolk or anything. They're 4 weeks old now. So it's not yolk. That's actually just because they're able to eat and graze all day long. They can't eat the adult Daphnia, but they're definitely eating all the baby Daphnia. And you can see some of their markings are starting to develop even in this guy at 4 weeks old. So I really like this style of spawning. And you can see even the Daphnia have eggs in some cases. So that Daphnia there has some eggs, and as you look up towards the light, which they're attracted to, they orient themselves swimming with it. You can also see a lot of the Daphnia have eggs on their back, and there are probably 15 to 30 eggs on each of them, which is interesting because when I put the Daphnia in here, it was very cold outside, whereas it's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit in the house. And outside, they were laying the kind of eggs that they only lay 2 to 5 babies or eggs of, and they're called cysts. And they let those go, and they go either in the water and hatch very slowly, or they actually are designed to dry out. And so over the winter and spring, these Daphnia were having the eggs that they lay just in case it dries out. Now they're giving live birth to 30 plus babies at a time. And so it's interesting to see their biology change as they're brought into the warm house and they're shifted from the spring weather or even winter weather they just endured outside, and now what they're living in here. I also think that the temperature and the seasons going on right now are in perfect line with the natural habitat of the Elassoma Gilberti, because these little guys living down in Florida, they love spawning, anytime from mid to late winter in Florida all the way up through until when summer and the rainy seasons start. And that is because they like to spawn when the water is low and all the food is really dense and the fish are close to one another. And then when it rains heavily every afternoon with thunderstorms towards the spring and summer, that water in ditches and lakes and rivers and wetlands starts connecting as it fills up, turns from puddles to small ponds to lakes and rivers and wetlands and marshes. And then all these different fish can swim all over the place. And that's really the strategy of tropical and subtropical fish around the world for the most part. And that's why fish collectors like to either collect the adults right before they spawn during the dry season, or at the end of the dry season before the wet season, they like to collect the young ones that have hatched that are getting ready to swim off. And that's why we see that in the aquarium hobby so often. But I wanted to give you guys a little update on these fish. That's the big one, just for another reference. This is kind of the average size one. And you can see they're not eating the Daphnia. They may be eating some of the baby Daphnia that are getting born daily now in the tank. But these ones are still, they're very small fish. And so you can see they're not even a third of my pinky fingernail. Also, the two ram's horn snails that I let go in here, that was probably a bad idea. They're not really eating the algae. They're just kind of eating biofilm on the sides. And honestly, that biofilm that you see that gets so thick down in here, that is what the baby fish are eating. That and the green water, all the little microorganisms, this is what those fish are eating when they're really young. So I definitely think that this is the fastest I've been able to grow them out. Would it work for fish like Badis or, scarlet Badis, things like that, little chili rasboras or something? Perhaps. I haven't really ever tried it, and we have the crushed coral in this tank, so it's actually a slightly alkaline tank rather than acidic, which usually I do more black water stuff for really nano fish. And so I'm interested to see how the chemistry change affects things, but definitely algae being present and being all over the place is one major change I've noticed with having that harder water or even just above neutral. Also, all the little ram's horn snails, those guys are not as friendly to eggs, and they probably would eat any of the fish eggs if they got the chance or if they found more fish eggs. So I think if I do this again, I won't introduce any snails unless they're maybe like a nearite snail or something that I can keep very limited. Other than that, I am kind of just documenting what unfolds here. And the parents are in the other room. They may have another round of babies. If so, I'll collect them out and maybe either put them in here or in a new tank. But in the meantime, I haven't been feeling well with my health, and this has been really a cool thing to have because I can just wheel up next to it, next to the countertop here, and take a look at what's going on. And I foresee a problem, and if you've been watching this episode and thinking about what I've been saying, you'll probably foresee the same problem, which is this fish here, beautiful, growing so fast, so proud of it, but it will probably be big enough to eat its smallest siblings soon, probably next week, I would guess. So these mid-sized fish will probably be safe, but any of the very, very small ones that still are hiding down low, if we can find any, will probably become lunch. And that's kind of a survival of the fittest thing, but it's also a strategy that a lot of fish use so they grow at different rates in case there's a lack of food right when they hatch. Maybe their growth spurt is spaced out several weeks or a month later. And so that way, if the first round doesn't have enough food to flourish and survive, maybe the second or the third round, or maybe even the most small, runty little fish that have a slow start end up being able to make up for that difference later on. But I just wanted to keep you guys posted. Also, let you know the isopods, like I said, they did great. They cleaned the eggs. They did not touch viable eggs. I was able to observe several of them. There was one just scuttling over a rock right there. And they're mostly nocturnal, and they'll bury themselves in this sand, crushed coral, and aqua soil substrate that I've placed all this on. And yeah, things are growing pretty well. This little light from Petco, this little, as it's called, a Matrrial spotlight, it's actually doing pretty good. The plant's right under it. My exact thought was, yeah, they might cause a bit of algae. So that is occurring, but it's actually got enough light that it's putting a little bit of color into the plants, the Bacopa and the Ludwigia, but nothing major. You know, you're not seeing the bright, intense reds or anything, and that's what I expected. Plus, I'm not fertilizing heavily or anything like that. No CO2. So thanks for watching, you guys. I just wanted to give you an update and show you the little American Badis, as I would call them, the pygmy sunfish. There's a number of species, but these are my favorites. And I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. I'll talk to you later. Bye.